So this time around, we want to take this login.vue file, this login page component, and turn it into something more than the word login fully left justified in the browser window. So let's get started. To start with, we can simply put in our necessary div class container for Bootstrap, and then a div class row, and then a div class call, just to get it in the same location as the body component. Then we'll give it a title, h1 login h1, and maybe I'll give that a class of mt5 just to push it down a bit. And then I'll put a horizontal rule. Then we'll have our form components, but I'll put the button in first. Again, a horizontal rule, and then an input type equals submit, class equals say button dash primary, and value equals login. Okay, so now with no more changes, let's go see what that looks like. Back to my browser and look at the login page. And there it is. So we're going to put our form inputs here. Now, for most logins, you're going to have email and password, and that's exactly what we're going to use. And if I wanted to, I could just put the appropriate HTML right in there. But if you recall, a few sections ago, or a couple of sections ago, over here in this project, where we were using the CDN version of Vue, we actually built in the file forms.js all of these components, one for text input. So why don't we use that? So I'll copy this text input component right here, and I'll go back to my other project, and I'll create a new folder inside of components called forms. And inside of that, I'll create one for text input. New file, text input.vue. I'm going to give it its template and paste that in there, and then I'll format this a little better. That's better. And it will have to have a script tag. And you might notice that you have this auto suggest here from the Vue plugin, and there's lots of different versions of the script tag. And of course, the one I want is way down here. We're not using the composition API, so we'll just put that in there. And we'll give it a name, say text input. That seems logical. And it's going to have properties. I can just go copy those from over here, all of its props, like that. And then switch back to this project and paste in its properties. Now I have a text input available to me. And we may as well do the other two since we're here anyway. So new file, we have select input .vue. I'll go over here to the old project, get its template, copy, and put it in a template tag, paste, and format it. And you'll see there's an error there, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It also requires a script tag right there, and we'll give it a name of select input, and go get its properties right here, and paste this in. Now, why is there an error here? Well, there's an error because, if you point at it, it'll actually tell you, elements in iteration expect to have a vbind key directive. And that's just used internally by Vue. And as you can see, the NPM version of, or the Node version of Vue is a little pickier than the CDN version, but we'll put it in. It'll work without it probably, but I'm going to put it in anyway. So I'll use the shorthand vbind directive. Key equals, and all I'll put in here is option.value, some unique value. And I know that the option.value part of whatever I pass to this will always be unique. So that solves that problem. Okay, and let's go create the checkbox. So a new file in the forms folder, check input.vue. And we might not use that this time around, but we'll probably use it eventually. So I'll copy its template from the old project and put in a template tag and paste and format and give it a script tag. And the name will be check input, and we'll go copy its properties right here. Now it's props, and paste those in. Perfect. So now I have this available to me. I have the text input, the select input, and the check input. And of course, the one I want to use right now is the text input. So let's go back to login.vue, and let's wrap this entire thing after this HR, so right from here, we'll put in a form tag. And we're going to make a different version of this later, but this is enough to get us started. Form method equals post, action equals, say, /login, which doesn't go anywhere yet, but it will eventually. And its class is equal to needs validation, because I'm going to use Bootstrap's validation, and no validate. So that's my opening form tag. And of course, I'll put my closing form tag right here after my button form. And then I'll indent all of this as it should be, just so it looks a little bit better. Okay, let's use our first input. And it's as simple as this now. Text-input, which we'll have to import momentarily, but I'll write it out right now. It's going to have a label equal to email. The type will be equal to email. And the name will be equal to email. And that will set the name and ID attributes on the generated HTML. And finally, I'll make it required. Oops. And then I'll close my text input. Then I'll copy this whole thing and paste it and make this one password. And the type is password. And the name is password. And it's required. Okay, so now that we have this template using this component, this Vue component actually requires a script tag. And we'll give it a name, and I'll call it login. And it's going to have some components. So the component it's going to have, of course, is text input, which means I need to import it, but I'll get to that in a minute. Input. So here, let's go import that. Import text input from /forms/textinput.vue. And with those changes, if I got everything right, I should be able to go back to my browser. And there it is. Home works and login works. And of course, we don't have our validation in here yet. So let's go put our validation in. Back to Visual Studio Code. And this is going to go in the mounted function, lifecycle hook, as you know. And I'll just go copy the code from over here on, I think it was registration form that had it. Mounted, right there. So I'll copy this entire JavaScript, which is Bootstrap's validation, and paste it here. And now, once it recompiles, I should be able to go back to my browser, and I'll just refresh to make sure it's current, and try to log in. And I get the appropriate feedback. Perfect. And if I fill in an email address here, me@here.com, perfect. Okay. Now, this is really good, but you might notice, back over here in my code, anytime I want to use a form now, I actually have to put my opening form tag with whatever attributes it requires. I have to put my closing form tag. And then I also have to put in this JavaScript, whatever JavaScript validation you're actually using. And that's not a huge amount of work, but wouldn't it be great if I could, instead of having to do all of this every time, if I could actually wrap these inputs plus this button with another component that was a form component that has the validation JavaScript and everything built right in. That would be less coding. Now, right now, we only have one form, so it doesn't matter. But as the application grows, presumably we'll have more than one form, and it would be really convenient to have that kind of component. So let's build one of those, and we'll get started in the next lecture.